G'day and welcome back to the channel. Another What's Happening on the Internet video talking about drones, model aircraft, regulations, all sorts of things that hopefully you will find interesting and you may not be aware of. And this week, the Federal Aviation Administration in the USA released the approved administrators for the Recreational Drone Pilot Safety Test, the trust test. That is, it's designed to ensure that people flying drones recreationally have at least a basic knowledge of what they can and can't do, what is legal and what's not. It's a great idea. Fantastic. Why not? I also wonder, though, whether this is just a way to collect names and addresses for later use, because you've got to provide a name and address when you regulate, and you can print out a little certificate to say you passed the thing. And it may be that you are required to produce proof of this, having passed this online test, if you're approached by law enforcement officials. So, yeah, it's an incentive for you to hand over information, and I'm not so sure that's it. Why do I need to hand over information to fly a toy in my garden? I don't know, but apparently you've got to. It's all about control. But here we go. Anyway, look, this is the list of organisations. We've got the Academy of Model Aeronautics, AMA. That stands to reason. But before we get onto the list, I wondered why can't the FAA just do this themselves? They've got a website. They've got the personnel, they can set up the exam on their website, and people can be advised just to go to the website, fill out the form, get their test results, print their certificate, and be on their way. Why do we need to involve these other organisations? Now, it was put to me that this is because these organisations have a greater reach into the recreational community than the FAA does. So they're going to basically be able to reach out to, in the case of the AMA, their members, and in the case of Boy Scouts of America, their members. And so it's going to broaden the reach of this whole trust thing. But then I looked at the list and I thought, hang on a minute, we've got some rather non-recreational players, haven't we? Who on earth is Cross-Flight Sky Solutions? What else have we got here? The Volantis Aerospace Corporation. That doesn't sound very recreational to me. And I looked at some other ones, Tactical Aviation. Now, I couldn't find any mention of tactical aviation when I Googled for it. Yeah, there's talks about the term there's links to the term tactical aviation, but doesn't seem to be an organisation called Tactical Aviation. And if there was, would that be a recreational group? I don't know why this exists at all. The FAA should have just put the test on their own website and said to these people, put a link to our website with the test. Why are they reinventing the wheel? Why are they putting up their own websites with the questions and answers? And it just doesn't make any sense. And then there's another problem, that the idea of an exam like this trust exam, should be to make things clear, to clarify and inform. But if we go up to, let's have a look at Twitter today. Brendan Schulman, he is the legal advisor for DJI in the USA. He put this tweet out. I got 2 questions wrong in the FAA Drone Zone Trust Test, but that's because I disagree with the correct answer. Per section 44809, a recreational flyer can fly beyond Brendan, we'll get to that later, her own visual line of sight if a co-located visual observer is used, i.e., for example, FPV goggles. And the question being asked was, using a visual observer allows a recreational flyer to fly a drone beyond their visual line of sight, true or false? Now, Brendan answered true for the reasons he's given in his tweet, but the official answer is no, it's false. And this answer was labelled incorrect. Using a visual observer does not allow a recreational flyer to operate beyond visual line of sight. Now, technically, you could argue that, either answer could be right, because what is visual line of sight? They haven't defined visual line of sight. And the reality is, visual line of sight is whenever you cannot see the drone. And if you have FPV goggles on, you cannot see the drone, but you are allowed to fly in that situation if you have an observer. So Brendan actually got the correct answer in my opinion, but someone who might have answered that would have been marked wrong. And this is confusing. It is not the job of the trust exam to confuse people. It's to clarify. So I'd say that's a bit of a fail on the part of the FAA. And of course, if they're going to change this, all these players in the list here will have copies of that question and answer. That'll have to be updated. If the FAA just stuck it on their own website and said, hey, AMA, point to our website, tell people they've got to pass this online exam before they can legally fly, would have been so much simpler. Why make things difficult? Oh, I forgot, it's a bureaucracy. That's their job, is to make life difficult for everybody except themselves. Never mind. Anyway, let's go on. There was something else that the FAA were involved in today, and it is the Drone Advisory Committee meeting. This is an organisation set up with members from all over the place. Now, remember that over 85% of all drone activity in the national airspace is conducted by amateurs, by recreational flyers. But the Drone Advisory Committee is stacked with industry players. The recreational, the hobby gets very little representation. I think we've got Vic Moss and his group. We've got the FPV Freedom Coalition. I'm not sure even if the AMA is still on there, but it's basically all business. It's all commercial users who are going to be telling us what we can do. We, the majority of drone operators, are going to be told by the minority what we can do. Now, to be fair, the advisory committee doesn't make rules. It's just basically makes representations to the FAA, makes recommendations, and some of the stuff they make is pretty damn good. I'm not going to knock them for the good work they do, because they do some good work. For example, they were looking at how to deconflict airspace and discussed there was a tasking group set up, and they come up with things like the use of voluntary ADSB in, which, as we know, I'm a great proponent of that. Got my ADSB alarm, which, yes, will be available shortly. The ADSB alarm, that's a fantastic aid to situational awareness, being aware of what's flying around you while you're flying your drone or RC model. They also said radio use by UAS operators. Again, for years I have advocated that if you're flying a model aircraft or a drone, have a cheap scanner that can pick up the local operating frequency on the aviation band. You'll know when planes are coming, you'll know their intentions, whether they intend to fly past you or whatever. So these two things I am already a great proponent of. It's taken them a while to catch on, but hey ho, they're a bit behind the times, but they'll get there. Then voluntary onboard access, voluntary notify and fly, and ground-based remote ID in detection network. This is all pretty airy-fairy futuristic stuff, but I want you to listen to what Mark Colburn has to say in this little piece of the video.
Next slide. The first one is voluntary ADSB in use for UAS operators. Now, this one didn't get included until almost the end, probably because it's such an obvious suggestion. We put this recommendation first because it's the easiest to implement, and the technology exists now. It's simplistic and relatively inexpensive, probably costing maybe a couple bucks a drone.
A bit more than a couple of bucks, but never mind.
And one manufacturer already includes this feature in their newer models. And customers seem to like it, and they've been giving it good reviews from what I've been able to see. I know I was flying my Mavic Pro Platinum on a project here just inside DFW class surface area under a Lance authorization, by the way.
Obviously not this week.
A couple weeks ago, and I had a Schweitzer 300 helicopter come into my area, really kind of unannounced, and he was flying at 250 feet. And luckily, I was flying at treetop level at the time, and I was able to recover the drone and get it on the ground real quick. But I'll tell you, it came out of nowhere, and I really would have liked to have had some type of notification that...
Now, let's talk about this. This is really important. Now, here we go. Here's a guy flying his drone legally, within the regulations, with a Lance approval, and his operation was threatened by a helicopter coming through at a couple hundred feet. Who's in the wrong here? Why are drone operators being told you're responsible when this guy was doing everything right? And he was flying well within the rules, and he'd done all the things he should have done, but a helicopter comes through at 200 feet. Now, this is what I think we need to do. We need to get through to the FAA that the risk profile for sub 500 feet has changed dramatically, and you cannot protect the piloted, the crewed aviation. I'm going to call it manned. Damn, it's manned aviation. We cannot protect manned aviation that are flying below 500 feet by simply trying to regulate drones. We need to acknowledge that it may be no longer safe for manned aircraft to operate unnecessarily below 500 feet. Now, helicopters traditionally have got a get out of jail free card. Oh, you can fly low with your helicopter. It's a helicopter. But no, maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe we need to say, actually, it's just not safe to fly a helicopter below 200 feet if you are transiting from point to point. If you're having to do low area work like ag work or inspection work, that's fine. But that generally is within a very, very small area, and it can be notamed and people can be aware of that. But if you are just flying your helicopter from point A to point B, it should now be a legal requirement to stay above 500 feet, not 200 feet, because at 200 feet, you pose a risk, an unreasonable risk to people. If you hit, as they say, if you hit a drone and your helicopter crashes, and people are killed on the ground below, who's at fault? In this instance, if that helicopter had hit Mark's drone, Mark would have been at fault, even though he did everything right. And that, to me, just means that the current rule set is inadequate. It's woefully inadequate. But the FAA are not looking to how can we make it safer. They're looking at how can we further regulate drones. That's not good enough. It's not good enough. We must take a pragmatic approach to regulation, and that means regulating to say, I'm sorry, you guys, you manned aviators, you can no longer fly below 500 feet. Even if it's convenient, it's just not safe, is it? Okay, now I want to talk, or they talk about remote ID and its usefulness in deconflicting airspace. Let's have a listen to this.
But to an operator that consistently operates below 500 feet AGL, for instance, ag operators or helicopter operators that are doing like pipeline patrol or power line installations, this option might be very, very attractive. Now, our group engaged in a spirited conversation about the range of airborne to airborne remote ID, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth signals, and whether the signal could be received and processed by an onboard solution with enough lead time to be useful to an aircraft pilot. Well, testing has been done in this area, including a recent ASTM MOC presentation that showed remote ID info packets are received out to 3 kilometers. Our group was presented with enough.
Now, that's interesting. So the remote ID packets can be received up to 3 kilometers away, and this is going to improve situational awareness. I'd actually challenge that. I would challenge that quite strongly, because a radius of 3 kilometers, that's nearly 30 square kilometers over which an aircraft would be receiving remote ID packets. Now, it's easy to imagine, quite easy to imagine there being a dozen or more drones flying within that 30 square kilometer area. And does any pilot have the time or the ability to track that many drones, to be aware, to see what's happening? No, this is actually going to add to information overload in the cockpit, unless you have some very sophisticated systems that can work out exactly what's a threat and what's not. That's possible, but it's certainly not going to be within the realm of low-cost solutions for a pilot. This is just going to be counterproductive. It's going to add to the pilot's workload, which inevitably reduces situational awareness. They do not need to know that there is a drone, 400 feet below them flying in someone's backyard as they fly over at 450 feet. And the key thing there was, why do we have manned aviation outside of the cases where it was mentioned, pipeline inspection and ag work? Why do we need to have these manned aircraft below 500 feet? Again, I must bring it up. The secret to creating a safer airspace is not integration, it's segregation. We've got to get the manned aircraft up and the unmanned aircraft down. We've done that with the 400-foot height limit on model aircraft and drones, but manned aviation still has this get out of jail free card. There are so many instances, such as the one Mark mentioned earlier with the helicopter, where manned aviation just to hell with it. We're just going to fly whatever height we want to. And this doesn't seem to be recognised as a danger. Now, here in New Zealand, an analysis of all the fatal accident reports indicates that in the majority of fatal aviation incidents, flying below 500 feet unnecessarily was a major contributor to the outcome. You think they would learn from this, but regulators are not heavy on science. They don't seem to, where's the risk analysis, I might say, show me the bodies, I might say. They're not bringing science and fact and evidence into their decision making. Now, remember again, of course, this is the Drone Advisory Committee. They're not making the rules, they're making recommendations. But I'd say remote ID is not, it's different to electronic conspicuity. It is not a way to improve aviation safety. Remote ID is so that the cop on the ground knows who you are, where you are, and can come and arrest you if he wants to. It's nothing to do with aviation safety. It's not going to enable piloted aircraft to avoid unmanned aircraft because it's either going to be too much information or not enough information. It's never going to be right. So that's something that we really need to address and get across to these people that, no, this remote ID, I don't believe it's necessary, and I don't believe it's a good thing at all. Okay, now we come to the thorny issue of beyond visual line of sight. And this is another thing that's annoyed me for many years. Now, we've got an industry, the drone industry, and we've got regulators who are trying to work out how we can fly beyond visual line of sight safely. But there's virtually no representation from the hobby. And the hobby is the only group that has been flying regularly beyond visual line of sight for decades without any known incidents. I've not heard of one incident of property loss, one incident of injury, or one incident of death associated with BVLOS flight by the hobby. You can go on YouTube, you can see thousands of people flying 5, 10, 15, 50, 100 kilometers from the launch point, beyond visual line of sight, without any incidents. Yet our knowledge base seems to be totally discounted. We don't count for anything because we're just the hobby. We're just the people that perform 85% of all unmanned aviation activities in the airspace. No. We're going to call on the bureaucrats and the professionals who actually really haven't even done it themselves. Or if they did, obviously they were breaking the law and they'd never admit it. But why are you calling on the ignorant to come up with these things? Why don't you have the hobby? The hobby should be making up a huge percentage of the BVLOS working committee or the task group, because they're the ones who are doing it. We are the ones doing it. But let's have a listen to what they say.
So beyond visual line of sight, as you heard Jay say, there's a new ARC. So we're developing a working group that will address beyond visual line of sight. As we open up membership again, we'll probably get some new members that can help us staff this working group, help us get all the information we need to be able to produce the kind of focus on the safety or execution, not rulemaking, not implementation.
Okay, so again, who has been doing this safely? Who are the people who know how to do this safely, who've done many flights and done them all safely? It's not Boeing, it's not NASA, it is the hobby, it is the recreational flyer. And I'd like to see who is involved in this working group. Perhaps they tell us.
But SMS operations, NAS integration, those types of things. And we'd like to work very closely with the ARC in developing recommendations to provide to the ARC from this working group. Next slide, please. So this is just an awareness so that...
Okay, Drone Safety Week. That's a good thing. Everyone should be aware of drone safety. Even though there are no bodies, it's still got to be safety. I'm just going to move on a bit because this is interesting. This is a slide that says everything. It backs up everything I've been saying. This is unmanned aerial system. I don't know what this stands for, but we're talking safety still, right? We're still talking safety. And here's the collaboration list, the list of collaboration. They're collaborating with industry. Of course, industry is right at the top. 15% of the activity gets the top billing in terms of consulting. Why? Because bureaucracy. Then government, of course, government's right there behind industry. They're important. Then international entities, unions. You've got to have unions in there because they can cripple you from an industry point of view if you don't pay attention to them. And associations. I thought, this might be model flying associations. This might be the hobby, but it's not. And trade shows and events. Let's just listen.
Sit on the NAC and can collaborate with the NAC in that way. This is our first reach out to the DAC. Of course.
Actually, I'll skip ahead because we don't listen to all the drivel. I want to hear about associations.
And attend more events like the UAS.
It's trade shows. Let's go back a little bit. It's actually, let's see what they say.
We see that need to be addressed. Working internationally, we can work with our international partners to see some lessons learned that we might not see here to be able to fill in some of the gaps that exist in our safety programs moving forward. Of course, working with the unions as we always do and always will, other trade associations, and
so trade associations, this isn't the hobby, this is trade associations. So this collaboration for safety leaves out the group that does 85% of the unmanned aerial operations in the airspace. We don't count for beans because we don't have any money. That's what it is. We don't have any money. Industry's got lots of money. Government's got lots of money. International entities usually well funded. Unions got heaps of money. These trade associations, they're pretty rich groups. And of course, you've got trade shows and events. There's a lot of money flows there. But the recreational flyer, the vast majority of the group that makes up the single largest component by a huge margin of unmanned aerial flights, we don't count. We just don't count. And this has to change. Okay, now here's the bit that really, I don't know, I'm old, I'm not a millennial. This really aggravates me. This next piece here, they spent, what was it, over 30 minutes on this piece. Listen.
Next agenda item. Next agenda item is Task Group 10's recommendations for gender-neutral language in the drone community. Trish Gilbert, Executive Vice President, National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and Task.
So we're going to talk for over 30 minutes on the importance of gender-neutral language for the drone community. Now, apparently drones are such a huge risk. We have to enter these regulations, remote ID, network remote ID, registration, exams online, yet we're going to spend 30 minutes talking about the language we use. Because, why? Is it because people are too stupid to realize that when you say airman, it means anyone that flies an aircraft or is part of an aircrew? that unmanned aerial vehicles are actually pilotless vehicles or remotely piloted vehicles. Let's face it, when Amelia Earhart flew solo anywhere, was that an unmanned aerial vehicle? No, of course it wasn't. People are not this stupid. They know what is meant. You don't have to go all gender neutral and politically correct and woke just to, I don't know. This is, it beggars belief, but now they're going through all the motions. They're going to strike out all the manned aircraft. We're no longer flying unmanned aircraft. They're uncrewed or whatever. Seriously, I just don't believe. I think if things are as bad as they say in respect to drone safety and the need for all this extra technology and cost and bureaucracy, then why are we talking about this? One, I'm a problem solver. I've been a problem solver all my life. And generally speaking, you can tell how intelligent someone is by how easily or how well they solve problems. Intelligence or problem solving is a measure of intelligence. Stupid people can't solve problems. Smart people solve problems reasonably quickly. And one of the keys to solving problems, especially complex problems, is to analyze and prioritize. You look at a problem, you break it down to smaller sub-problems, then you look at which are the most important or the dependent components of that problem. Then you solve those ones first. Solve the hard or the important bits first. Leave the tiny details, leave them till later. There's no use solving them first, because if you do that, you may find that you can't solve the key problem. You've wasted all that time. But here we have half an hour of what is probably, a 2-hour presentation, a 2-hour discussion focused on nomenclature. Just the words we use to describe things and how we must avoid at all costs any gender-specific terms. Seriously, this just shows what a complete farce some of this stuff is. Now, as I said, this Drone Advisory Committee do some wonderful stuff, and I pointed that out earlier on in this video. Some of the stuff is really, really good, and it needs to be done. But this sort of stuff is just pandering. It's pandering to the woke brigade. It serves no purpose whatsoever. This is not going to save a life. This is not going to save anybody's property from damage. This is not going to keep pilots in the air safe. It's not going to do anything except make excessively woke people feel good about what they've achieved. And in fact, I'm not going to show you, but later on in the video, there's a huge backslap. Oh, we've set the grounds for the whole aviation community in terms of our gender neutral language, blah, blah. What a load of BS. It's just, this completely destroys much of the credibility that was gained earlier in this video through the work they did. Why are the taxpayers funding this kind of dross? And these people on the committees work for free, but look, we've got FAA people who are going to be going through this. That's where your tax dollars go. And the time and resource spent on this would be much better spent addressing the real issues, the issues that cost aviators their lives every day in the skies over our heads. Nobody's ever died as a result of recreational multi-rotor drone use or by being called an airman when they're a female. No one's ever died of that. Let's focus on the real problems. This is a diversion. This is a diversionary tactic to take our minds off the things that are really important. It's not good enough. It is absolutely not good enough. Okay, now here's something else. Now, remember originally in the NPRM, the FAA wanted to have this network remote ID set up where you couldn't even take off unless you got clearance through a network air traffic or UTM system to make sure that you were going to be flying in a safe place and there wasn't going to be a conflict in the airspace. We were told this was essential to the future of drone safety. Now, those of you who are reliant on the LANC system will have noticed that this week it was down. And it wasn't down for just a couple of minutes. It was down for a long time. And in my submission to the FAA's NPRM, I said this network remote ID system represents a huge single point of failure. What happens if the network remote ID system goes down? All drone activity must stop in the airspace because craft will be unable to take off without the necessary authorizations. And I think the events of the last week kind of show that this is a real potential danger. When LANC went down is one thing, but if the entire network remote ID system went down, it's something completely different. Let's listen to what Tim has to say about this whole LANC situation.
For the air traffic organization that operates and maintains the LANC, the platform, we experienced an outage from 11 a.m. Sunday morning till approximately 7 p.m. Tuesday evening. We know it was impactful.
It's 3 days.
As soon as we recognized that a regularly scheduled maintenance update had a confliction basically between the geospatial server and the FAA's network configuration, we notified all the UAS service providers that option or the option or access to file for UAS operations was still available through the drone zone. We also put out that message through our network. So a very basic form of a backup, but we know that doesn't rise to a level of resiliency or contingency that you may be looking for.
So there we go. Even the Lance system, they can't provide the necessary level of backup. And Lance is much simpler than network remote ID. So I think this network remote ID thing, which, as I say, it's not struck out, it's just delayed because the technology is not ready yet. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. It is going, as I said, it's not about integrating drones into the national airspace. It's about segregating manned and unmanned aviation into two different layers within the airspace. Manned aviation, 500 and above. Unmanned aviation, 400 and below. Then you don't need all this crap, because if you look out your window right now, you will not see a sky filled with drones. There doesn't need to be deconfliction between drones, because there just aren't enough drones there to worry about. And despite the promises of drone delivery by Amazon and Domino's, and it's just not going to happen. There's been some interesting articles this week saying that the big thing that will kill drone delivery is the weather, because the weather, let's face it, in winter, you might get day up on day with strong winds, heavy rain. Your drone deliveries are all grounded then. You're not going to risk flying a drone over any kind of vulnerable targets if there's so much wind and rain that it could get knocked out of the sky at any time. And and we don't even have BV loss stuff sorted yet. So that this skies filled with clouds of drones will never happen. It's like the flying cars of the 1950s. We were told, flying cars are coming in popular mechanics, popular science. Well, it's now 2021, and although we have some wonderful 3D rendering and some wonderful prototypes which really are not at all practical, we still don't have flying cars. It's like nuclear fusion. It's only 10 years away, and it has been since 1960. These things, because if you look deeper than just the 3D renderings and all the hype and the venture capital pitches, the technology is just not there to back them up. And sometimes even the business case doesn't exist. Even if we had the technology, it's not economic to use it. Okay, now here's something really important. Last part of the stream. Remote ID is supposed to be a cure-all for all problems. It's not. It has some really big disadvantages, some really big liabilities, some risks. And certainly in the UK, when remote ID was announced, I know a number of commercial drone operators were very concerned that remote ID information, if it's publicly available through an app or something, it's under the specifications laid out, it will identify the position of the drone operator. And it's the same in the USA. Remote ID will enable law enforcement or anybody to tell exactly where you're standing while you're flying your drone. They've said this represents a risk because we have valuable equipment. We may be on our own and vulnerable, and we don't want people coming around while we're trying to fly a drone and distracting us, or worse, attacking us and stealing our gear. This has been played down a lot by the regulators and the police. Oh, no, it won't happen. Listen to what Vic Moss has to say here. And I have to say, now, Vic is someone I was a bit skeptical when I first saw him appointed to the DAC, because he was supposedly a recreational user, but he is a professional operator. So a bit of a conflict there. And I would prefer to have seen a solely recreational user appointed in his position, but I've got to give Vic credit. He seems to be pulling his weight. He seems to be doing a good job for the recreational community. And let's listen to what he's got to say here.
Boss, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Jay. I broached this subject just a bit ago, but I think it's something that as DAC members, we really need to think about and possibly contribute to, and that is the safety of the drone operators. Whether it's a corporate operator, individual operators like myself. Some of you do know that I'm already right now involved in a situation where a local pilot was attacked 2 weeks ago. Drone and controller were destroyed, phone was damaged, and he was hurt. With remote ID coming out and with the ability for people to find us fairly easily, even, obviously we're going to be VLOS anyway, but this needs to be addressed at the federal level, because as it is right now, local police won't do anything. In the particular instance here in Colorado, the guy was charged with criminal mischief, and that was the end of it for now. So I don't know if this is a DAS committee task group or not in the future.
So there you go. Vic has related a case where someone was attacked and their equipment was destroyed. And this is before remote ID. Now, I think I don't think the FAA will listen to this, because they've got a long record of not actually acknowledging the science, the facts. They'll go with what they want to do. And it's the same with regulators all over the world. And in the UK, the British police, they're the same. And the CAA, they're the same. They probably won't acknowledge this. It's unimportant. Don't worry, it'll never happen. Well, it already has happened, even before remote ID. So I think this really has to be hammered home to regulators. Hopefully that Vic and the DAC can do that. I'm not optimistic. I'd love to be proven wrong again. Hopefully I will be. But this is one of the evils of remote ID. And we've got to ask ourselves, well, what's remote ID going to do to positively improve the situation? How many lives will remote ID save? Well, none, because there are no bodies. There are no bodies. And how much property damage will remote ID stop? Well, there's virtually no property damage due to drones. As I say, this whole drone thing is woefully overstated. And in fact, it's probably the fact that they spent over half an hour talking about gender-related terms shows just how much they're off base with all the stuff they're doing here. Apart from that early stuff with the deconflicting the airspace with the ADSB and the radios and so forth, the FAA itself just really are out of touch. And it's out of touch because when you look at all these groups, they're loaded with industry people. They're loaded with people from industry and trade groups and unions. They're not loaded with people from the hobby. The 85% of all activity in the unmanned airspace, we don't count for a bean. We get token appointments. And Vic Moss is working real hard. I know that Dave Messina from the FPV Freedom Coalition is working really hard. I don't know about the AMA, but the people from the hobby that are there are working very hard, but really they're not having as much effect as I think we should get from an 85% majority of unmanned aviation operations. I really think we should have far more clout, but we're not getting it. We are not getting it. Now, before I go, one thing that really annoyed me with this. Now, I watched the end of the stream. I was late to the stream because YouTube didn't tell me it was on. I put one of those reminders in, but it didn't email me. And so I was late to the stream, and I got there, and the live chat was operative, and the comments from the live chat, largely from the hobby, which again, it is the hobby that's involved here. Most of the people posting the live chat were members of the hobby. That 85% of the airspace use, the recreational users, they were in the live chat questioning, making comments, and that was great because it shows the engagement with the hobby, but the hobby isn't being listened to. And to show you just how much the hobby is not being listened to, the contempt that is shown for the hobby. I was watching the stream after the thing. I was watching this video after the stream, and then it stopped. And I thought, oh, okay. And of course, the live chat was down here. The recording of the live chat was working down here. So I reloaded the video, and then live chat was not available anymore. The FAA have decided to delete the live chat, probably because some of the comments were not flattering. Some of the comments asked challenging questions, and the easiest way for a bureaucracy to deal with that kind of thing is just to ignore it and to delete it, to change history, to change the record and make that stuff unavailable. That is very sad. That's very bad, FAA. I suggest that if you go to this Drone Advisory Committee meeting video and ask, in fact, I'm just going to reload it because maybe it was just an anomaly. Maybe that's just not what is happening. Maybe they've put it back. Maybe just YouTube messed up. Let me see. Nope, live chat's gone. In fact, I left a comment saying, why did you delete it? There we go. There's my comment. Why was it removed? They haven't replied to that. But I think you should go along and add your voice to this comment. Put another comment up. If you think it's unreasonable that they remove the live chat when it doesn't fit the narrative, it's just bad, totally bad. Right, so that's it. Good and bad from the Drone Advisory Committee meeting. But I want to leave this little video on a high, so I'm going over here because this is one of the best FPV videos I have seen in a very long time. I left a comment to that effect. I recommend you go and have a look at it. This is brilliant. I love this video. I don't know why, something about this video just really, let me just get rid of the music. Come on, stop. Oh, bit of delay. There we go. It is fantastic. It's wings and quads, obviously, and the audio is good. They've done a good job. I'm not going to put it up because of the music, but it is a brilliant FPV video. This is why we fly FPV. This is the fun of FPV. I love this video. There are bits in this that just made me go, wow, look at this. This is really cool. Follow video. Fantastic. Look at that. And it gets much closer in place. In fact, this wing here, it's brilliant. I hadn't seen this before. Let's see if I can find the piece. Here we go. Is this it? Look at the LEDs on the tail of this thing. Let me just go full screen for a moment, if it'll do it, because my computer's running very slow at the moment. But there's little LEDs on here which are spinning around. Yeah, here we go. Look at the LEDs on that. That's brilliant. I love that thing. This is a fantastic video. I recommend you go and have a look. These guys have only got 667 subscribers. If all their videos are this good, I'm going to subscribe. There we go. You've seen I've subscribed to this channel. It's fantastic, brilliant. So go and watch that video. Hopefully you'll be as wowed by it as I am. And it takes a lot to wow me with an FPV video these days because there's so many of them and so many of them are so samey, but this is so different and I love it. Go and watch it. That's it. That's the end of my little video for today. Hopefully it hasn't bored you too much. Part rant, part news, part fun. There you go. Anyway, the sun is out today. I'm going out to get some flight footage from the flight line. Hopefully there'll be people out there I can film. We get some fun back into the hobby again. In the meantime, thanks to my Patreon supporters. You make this all possible. And thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Overregulation is like a tumor. It's killing our hobby. It must be terminated. Now!